is the original piece that I paint. Yes, this is a full freehand piece that I did. Is no stencils here. The only mask that I have is for the frame of this piece, okay? This was a full freehand, and the reason why I'm showing you this is because this is a part of the process that to do fine lines. You know, as you can see, the size of this piece is very, very small. You know, it's I think it's 4 by 6 or 3 by 6. I'm sorry, 3 by 6. And but basically, what I will show you here is how I set up my airbrush to be able to do fine lines. That's the purpose of the video, okay? It's not that I will do a full piece of artwork, but is more about the explanation of the process, how to set up my airbrush, you know. And I will try to show you how I work with two different kinds of paints. I will use solvent-based paint, how I set up solvent-based paint, and how I set up water-based paint, okay? So Adam 304, you say you missed the start. It was just a brief explanation. I have problems trying to set up this horizontal, so I'm working vertical. Next time I will take care of that situation, okay? But let me tell you first. Well, this is a blank piece of paper. This is just a print paper, but it's a laser paper, and it's 24 pounds, so it's a good quality paper. That is important because to have a good quality material to work with is important. So this is how I start when I practice and when I show some of my students how to set up the airbrush. We practice on this kind of paper. And what I will do is basically right now only some samples of setting up the airbrush and the paint, which is very important, very interesting. First thing first, what I will do is I will use at this moment my Micron C. This is a Micron C. I can do this with pretty much any other airbrush, but the Micron is my favorite airbrush. You know, once you touch a Micron, you can hardly want to move to other ones. Of course, I can do with an Eclipse, I can do with any other brand, but this is my favorite airbrush to start working with. What I will like to explain first is, as you can see, this is a very old airbrush. You can see all the gold finish of the copper inside. But let me tell you, every time before we start or before I start any project, I need to test if my airbrush is in good conditions, right? So if it's set up properly. And in order to do that, I will use, in this case, a little bit of reducer. Why reducer? Because I will make the first demo using solvent-based paint. Our friends of Spray Gunner send me this paint to try. It's a custom creative. It's made in Spain. Of course, they send me different colors, and along with the reducer. This is acrylic thinner, and this is a solvent base. And I was so surprised how well it works, how easy it flows. So I I want to show you how I prepare a solvent-based paint, and I also will show you how I use water-based paint. The purpose of the video, like I explained before, is how to set up to do fine lines, because that's a common problem of many of my students and some friends. I have this black piece of paper because I want to show you something important. I want to set up this way, and I like to show you here. I need a dark background because I want to, this is some of the reducer that I will use, and I just pour a little bit of reducer. What is important here is that before you put a paint in your airbrush, you need to put the reducer first. The reducer doesn't matter if it's like water-based or solvent-based, needs to go first before the paint. And the reason why is because if you put the paint first and your paint is maybe too thick, it's probably you're gonna clog the needle and the nozzle in the front before you start. And one of the things that I do, I need to press down first to be sure that it's only air coming out, no paint, no reducer, because I'm just pressing down. Okay, but if I pull out, you can probably see the stream. You can see now that the reducer is coming out, okay? But only when I pull it back. When I pull my trigger, then the reducer is coming out, and that is great. That is great. So that means is my airbrush is in good conditions. I have no problem. You know, is working fine. Okay, it's no bubbles. Everything is going well. Then next is to add the paint. But let me tell you, the paint doesn't matter the brand. I cannot say the paint is airbrush ready, because even that the paint is kind of reduced, is maybe a little heavy, and especially if I want to do fine lines. If I want to do fine lines, I may need to reduce before I pour paint here. I know I have a little bit of reducer inside of my airbrush, but in reality, I need to pre-reduce my paint. That's how I do it. Every paint that I use, I pre-reduce it first. And I will show you what I do. In this case, I pour this paint straight from the bottle inside this little eyedropper bottle. You see, this piece here has 60% reducer, 40% paint. Okay, I know it's a lot of reducer, but this gives me this consistency. That way, the paint will flow easily every time that I try. And in order to have a good mix, okay, why I put it here? Because I can handle drops really easy with no problem. I can count drops. But before I do that, I will put a shaker piece. This is like a spaceship little thing, works fantastic. So I place it in there. I mix already, like I say, 60% reducer, 40% paint, okay? Then I shake it. This gives a very diluted paint, but with consistency. I'm not losing property of the paint. And if in the case my paint is a little bit thin, I can always add paint directly from the bottle. Let's see how it works, okay? So I will, I place this black background so you guys can see how the airbrush is spraying. But now what I will do is I will put another extra piece of paper. The reason why I have this extra piece of paper is because this is what I call my test sheet. I will say if this is my canvas, this is my test sheet, okay? So I always practice or test my airbrush here before I touch my canvas. That way, it always gonna be for sure only clean artwork in this area, and I can test my airbrush here. So I'm using some magnets to hold my piece of paper, okay? I have it right there, and I will add now, again, a little bit of reducer first here, only a couple drops. That's all I need. I have reducer, and I will add a couple drops of the paint, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4 drops. Okay, I have 4 drops of my pre-reduced paint. This is solvent base, like I mentioned before. This is custom creative, and to be honest, I'm being so surprised how well it works. Okay, something else that I do also is how I mix my paint in here, because I have some paint in there, but I use this paper towel. This paper towel, you know, the blue shop towel, is so soft and it works fantastic for me. I push my airbrush here with the needle exposed. Nothing's gonna happen, and bubble it. Press so it mixes inside and create bubbles. And just right here, I should be able to do fine line from this point. As you can see, this is on the paper towel. So, and it's already working fine. And this is, it works for me every single time. Adam says, I just got a tattoo of an Iwata Custom Micron C+. Now I just, if I could get your signature under it, oh, will be awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, let me show you here. So something else that I need for control is to have a Mac valve. I'm using this Mac valve by Greg's. For me, one of the best Mac valves in the market. Maybe this knob is a little big, but it's fantastic because it's very precise. Of course, I can use the Mac valve here on my Micron, but not all the airbrushes have this Mac valve. For example, if I use an Eclipse, the Eclipse doesn't have Mac valve under the cup. So that way, if I use an Eclipse, I always gonna have, I can control my air pressure from here, you know. So that's what I need. I always need to control my air pressure and be able to go up or down with my air pressure here, okay? So, Artipithecus, saludos, Maestro Gerald, greeting, nice class. My friend Artipithecus from Peru, so thanks for being with us. He says hi, thank you so much. Okay, so first thing I will do is I will test a little far away, just to have, just to be sure that I have a smooth blending of the color. The atomization is very good. very easy. And I will then try to go close, very close, sorry, very close, and try to do a few dots, very small dots. The trick with the airbrush is that we can do dots, fine lines with precision where we need it. Many people do thin lines, but they do quick. They do without control. And what we pretend here is to do it with precision. So that, because the airbrush must respond to every one of our, choices. It depends on what we want. Let's say I want to do fine lines. And if I want to do fine lines, I always try to start with loops. Let's say if I will do this, you guys can see that I have fine lines with consistency and are very nice, very clean, with no, not a problem. If I want to do a little thicker, I can always do, I can do this, or I can do like that. But let me tell you, I feel like my paint right now is a little thin. It's a little transparent. I may need a little bit more consistency. So all I need to do is just add more paint straight from here, and that will gives me more opacity on the paint. So that means I can really graduate how much consistency I can have it from the paint. The paint is pre-reduced, but it is working fine. So I will mix again, okay? Now let's see if you can see the color is a little darker, okay? And my lines are, I can do solid lines if I want, It's really important to have full control of the paint by handling the amount of reducer and the mix. If I pre-mix, it's easy for me to handle. Alexis Ortega says, Gerald, will you ever show how to grind on metal like you did on the Mermaid? We'll really love to know how to do that work. Yeah, eventually I will do. I actually been doing some classes for that because the process is a little bit complicated and we need to have that specific tools. But yeah, definitely is in my plans in the future to explain the process of doing that. Ismael Rodriguez is saying hi. Hello, Ismael. Okay, so this is just a test sheet, okay? So let's move on now on, let's say my canvas, which is another piece of paper. It's nothing really special because like I say, this is only a demo of how to do fine lines. Okay, so what I will do is I will move my phone a little bit to the side so that way you guys can see maybe a little bit more or a little bit better of what I'm doing, okay? Jason says, did you happen to mention what air pressure you like to use? I may have missed it. I didn't mention exactly the air pressure, but because I'm constantly changing depending of what I'm doing. If I need to go very close and fine detail, I need to go probably lower. But I'm assuming that here I'm not more than 10 psi. I think sometimes for very, very small detail, I go probably from 5 to 7 psi. But I need also to be very close. What happened if I have a very high pressure? What's gonna happen is I'm gonna crash the paint into my surface. For example, this is just an example, right? If I put my test sheet again here, okay? So if I place this here, let's say I want to do some detail work here. Let's say that line small with some kind of precision, I need to go I'm probably going about 10 psi. If I add more reducer, I can probably go 7 or 5 psi, very low. That's why I move it here to adjust. What happens if I go high? If I go high and I'm close, this is what's gonna happen for sure. It's gonna crash because it's too much air pressure and the dilution is very liquid, the paint. So that's why we need to adjust our air pressure according to how the viscosity of the paint. This paint is pretty reduced because I'm planning to do detail work, okay? So that's why I have a small ratio. You know, if I go low, I can go close and spend time, you know, working on some small space, you know, because remember, do fine lines is not about doing lines fast. It's doing lines with precision. Many artists say, oh, I can do fine lines, and all they do is go like very quick. But going very quick is not control. You need to have control of the airbrush. But are many things that needs to be considered, like distance, air pressure, and viscosity of the paint. Okay, so let me say I hope this answered your question. It's not a magic setting of the air pressure because the air pressure needs to be different and needs to be according to your needs. If my paint is a lot thicker, I probably need more air pressure because I can actually, you know, control the viscosity with the pressure. Let's say if I'm painting a t-shirt probably I need a thicker paint at higher pressure, and probably I will not use a micron. I may use probably an Eclipse. This is a CS, which is 0.35, but for t-shirts, maybe I use a VCS, which is 0.5, you know, to handle bigger viscosity paint. So we can actually change the settings according to our needs, okay? So let me do some fine loops here, but I will move this again. Sorry about that, but I need to move this in an angle so that way you guys can see a little bit more of the surface. Unfortunately, I cannot set up this horizontal. Maybe my setup was wrong at the beginning of the transmission and I'm working vertical. Sorry about that. But let's say right now I will do some loops, okay? What is important here is to see the consistency of the line. You know, I'm trying to be all at the same distance, you know. Everything is very close. Now I will separate my airbrush a little bit to do a drop shadow. So nothing's gonna change, it's just the distance. And I'm just doing a drop shadow of the same line, right? You see, I'm slow, probably about that's 10 psi, okay? And it's working fine for me. Probably if I need maybe more detail, I need to be closer and slower, okay? If I want to do some dagger strokes, let's say, I will go, maybe depends on the dagger stroke size, okay? So I will go and I'm working small, relatively small. And like I say, I'm using custom creative, which is solvent based. Solvent based actually runs very smooth. Its atomization is perfect. And sometimes people have a little bit of trouble working the same thing with paints like Createx, water-based. But the formula is pretty much about the same. I will try in a moment a little bit of the water-based paint so you guys can see very similar results. Astral Solari is saying hello. Thank you for being here, Astral Solari. So let's say I will do some other kind of lines, okay? So let's say I will do thicker lines, you know, a little bit more heavier. So, and I will repeat some loops too. This is the, I'm sorry, probably you guys didn't see it. This is the same paint, exactly same paint, same pressure. But all I did here on the thin line, I did closer. I pulled very little my trigger and I was able to do this. The drop shadow was just taking a little bit more distance and spray smoothly. I get slow to try to keep the same distance every time, so that way it looks like a drop shadow and it's consistency. But what's happened here? Why this line is darker than this one if it's the same paint? Well, because I just pull a little bit more my trigger. The trigger push more paint, let more paint going out, and I get probably a little bit more distance, but the flow is very good, it's very clean, and I was allowed to do this dark. Okay, so pretty much everything is controlled by ourselves here with our airbrush. Astral Solari, it's a pleasure to see your demonstrating the airbrush. Well, thank you. That's the intention. What I'm trying to do is do practical solutions to questions that friends has. So in this case, this friend of mine asked me, Gerald, I have problems doing fine lines. Every time I want to do fine line, the paint, it gets stuck or in the nozzle, the paint is not coming out, and I cannot do it. But probably the main reason is because you are using the paint directly from the bottle. But that's why I pre-reduce here. You know, I pre-reduce, like I say, 60% reducer, 40% paint in this particular case, okay? But then if, let's say, if my paint is too thin, let's say I will spray, this is as a demonstration, okay? I will add some paint right there, okay? Directly from my pre-reduced bottle of paint. This is direct from the bottle. This is a lot thicker than this one, okay? So, but this one will give me better coverage. Let's say I want to do lettering. Or imagine that I'm painting here on the paper towel, okay? I just spray, put some paint here. I always press here. You see how the needle goes in there? Nothing's happened. I have it folded, it's very soft, and I'm doing bubbles inside. That mixed with my paint that I had previously, and I will try to do thicker lines that covers good. Or maybe I try to do a blending. Let's say I will spray this, but I need, since my paint is thicker, I need to have more air pressure. So I higher my air pressure, so it pushes the paint easily. Okay, so let's do it then. You see? You see how dark it is? But I need more pressure. If I lower my pressure, I will lower my pressure, but then I will have trouble with that pressure to push out the viscosity of this paint. Probably I can do it. But I'm pulling out more my airbrush. If I open more my air pressure, I have a better flow. Okay, so let's say I want to write a name, just to say, let's say, let me pick a name. I read there Ismael. Ismael is a school name. Let's say I will do this. Ismael. My paint, if you see, I did a heavy stroke, but now I will lower a little bit to do drop shadow. And a little bit in a distance. To do the drop shadow. And maybe I want to do a sideline. Thinner. I have a little problem because I'm not as close as the board as I want, because the phone is in between you, between myself and the panel. But that gives you an idea how you can control the same paint, you know, in here. But now, you see, I run out of paint, okay? Alejandro Atem, saludos, maestro, saludos, how you doing? So I run out of paint, right? So let's say before I put this paint, I add more paint. What I need to do, I need to add reducer. Always reducer first. If I put the paint directly, it will go all the way in here and it may block my my airbrush. So this way, let me show you. I bubble again. You can see how it's bubbling. It's just reducer with a little bit of the paint that I have it inside. Now, it's coming very liquid because it's only reducer, but that reducer is cleaning my airbrush at this moment. You see, the flow is great. Now all I can do, all I need to do is just add more paint, but only a little bit, only a few drops. Okay, so that way I have my pre-reduced paint with a little bit of reducer inside. So that way I bubble again, and the flow that I have in my paper towel is good. Let me grab another paper towel. Hold on 1 second, please. This is again another piece of towel, paper blue towel. You know, I always fold it in 4, so that way it's soft enough. I clean and dispose my paint always on these kind of towels. Look what happened. Since this point, I will do fine line right here from the beginning. Why? Because the paint, the viscosity of the paint is fine. It's according with my air pressure. If I'm painting on t-shirts, let's say, I can go crazy high. My air, just to let you know, my compressor, which is right next to me, is a silent compressor from Aguara, the white shark, a beautiful compressor, is set up at 60 psi all the time. But I can go here only to 5 psi if I want to, okay? Because I can control my airbrush here. That's why the air pressure needs to be able to be set up every time. You know, the air pressure, I control it here. I can go very low if I need to go very, very close to do fine detail, you know, or I can go higher if I need to paint on a t-shirt. If I need a thicker line, solid lines, like a marker lines, I can do that, right? But I need higher pressure. And I need to do higher pressure because my paint needs to go through the fabric. If you see, the paint goes double here through the fabric. Let's say if this is a fabric, check it out. It goes through. I need a higher pressure to handle high viscosity paint, and I need lower pressure to do fine lines. Okay, so if I remember that I show you, if I go crazy close with higher pressure, what I gonna have it? I'm gonna have a spider, like a splash. Look at that. That's a mistake, right? Why? Because I'm doing high pressure. If I lower my pressure, I can do what I need, the size I need it, and I can control it how I want. Remember, The viscosity goes according with the distance and the air pressure that I'm handling. So now, if when you spray, you can feel, oh, this is too high, this is too low, or I'm too close or too far. You see? Now here, I can go, oh, I run out of paint again. So, same thing, reducer first, then paint. Let's say if my paint is too thin for the purpose that I want, then I choose my bottle and work directly from here, but always with reducer here. Even if I don't pre-reduce this, but I need reducer on my airbrush, it will help to have a good flow, okay? So I will go directly from the bottle this time. You know, look, the viscosity of the paint is thick. It's not as thin as the one I prep in here, you know, but the reducer that I put it on the airbrush previously, it will help to have a good flow. So what I need to do now, I need to mix. So I press, I bubble. Keep this in mind. The Micron airbrush, it has one of the finest needle on the airbrushes. Nothing happens. Don't be afraid to do that. I mean, I do it all the time. I teach to do that to my students. As long as you don't touch it with the surface, you know, you are fine. And as long as nothing hard touch the needle, nothing's gonna happen. Okay, I have a heavy paint right there because I handle directly from the bottle, okay, which is airbrush paint, but that doesn't mean airbrush ready. Remember that. Doesn't matter the brand. No paint, this is my personal point of view, okay? Don't get me wrong, but this is based on my experience. Is no paint that is airbrush ready. Because it's airbrush ready when you handle the right viscosity of your project. Every project is different, you know? So it's important that you mix everything according to your needs, okay? So I will move this a little bit right there, and I will test the paint. The paint will be thicker, so I need higher pressure, okay? So, and I will do this. If you see, I want you to see this. Can you see a little bit grainy around the line? Why? Because the paint is a little too thick. Maybe it's covering very well, but it's not smooth. It's not smooth. Look at that. I'm blending down. Of course, maybe I'm using the wrong airbrush for a thicker paint, right? But the viscosity is thicker. So that means if it's not running fine, it's because it needs reducer. So then if to this paint that it was directly from the bottle, I just add some reducer and I mix it again, you know, I will improve the flow of the paint. That's for sure. Okay, I will take this. The size of this nozzle, Astral Solari, is 0.23. That's the custom Micron C. Okay, that's the size. The eclipse like this is 0.35. The, let's say this is a custom Micron B is 0.18. So this is finer than this one, but I love this one because this is like multi-purpose airbrush for everything. It handles medium to fine paint, okay? So of course, every airbrush uses for the right purpose, right? So let's say now this is the same paint, but with more reducer. Now, I can spray it smoothly, quickly. I can reduce my paint, and I can do pretty much wherever I want, right? Why? Because I have control, but the control is based on many factors. I can blend, I can do lines, I can do pretty much anything that I want. If I want to do very fine detail, I can go and do that, right? No problem. Same paint, just getting close. You know, this is solvent paint, and it's running fantastic. I can do the same thing, but with Createx paint, okay? Let me just put a new sheet, and let's do a test with water-based paint. So that gives you an idea on how I have pretty much about same results. Adam, do you use a soft spring, or your brushes are just the factory spring? Let me tell you, this is the original spring. This, I mean, I try already everything, but to be honest, I don't like the soft spring. And the reason why I don't like the soft spring is because it doesn't have the resistance that I need when I press the airbrush. When it's too soft, you barely touch it, and you already is going pretty much almost full because it's so soft that you go all the way down immediately. The Micron has the ability, or let's say allows you to control the amount of paint just by how much you press down. Not only how far you pull back, but when I do this little fine detail right here, maybe I didn't go all the way down. I just go maybe halfway to have this. But when I do this heavy line, I go all the way down, right? So for me, I need a little bit more resistance. It's the same. Let me change the piece of paper, and I keep explaining you another sample. Give me one quick second, please. I will place a brand new piece of paper right here. Okay, so that way I can explain you also something that is important for me. Setting your airbrush is very, very important. Okay, we have a brand new canvas. We can see through a little bit of the red behind, but let me tell you something about my airbrush. Keep Ryder, how you doing? He's saying hi, my friend. Thanks. Let me tell you, few things that I need to control all the time. You know, it's a packing gland right here, about this area. And you need to be sure that everything is going well with your airbrush. If the packing gland or O-ring, Teflon O-ring that we have it here, is loose, when you bubble your paint, you know, inside of the cup, probably if this is not adjusted right, your paint maybe go inside. But if your paint is going inside, your airbrush is not setting up properly. Soft spring, in my opinion, I respect every artist's decision, but for me, it requires a little bit of resistance to have a more control when I'm pushing down. Something else, if I lose my handle on the back here, this knob right here gives me resistance on the trigger. Look, I will pull the trigger back here, okay? And you see how fast it returns? Because I have this almost full here, okay? If I pull this back, the resistance is still resistant, but it's not that fast. It's not that fast. So I want to have a little bit more resistance. Why? Because this way, your needle will return immediately all the way to the front. I don't know if it happens to you that sometimes you do a dagger stroke and at the end you have a dot. And you say, why I have a dot at the end? Why? Because your needle is not returning fast enough, and it's always a gap of space that gives you a dot at the end. And that's probably because this is way too soft. If I lose this too much, this will be very soft to pull, but it will take time to return. So I don't like to go all the way in, but enough resistance to do it. Now, since I pull this back without pressing down, I will probably have some splatter here if I just press down. Check it out. You see? Why? Because I pulled the needle before pushing down. So, the airbrush is designed, a good quality airbrush is designed so you can control absolutely everything. If you can control your air pressure, the tension on your trigger and on your needle, you can do pretty much anything you want. Okay, so for me, it is important to have control about those details. Okay, so Carlos Castellanos, Dios te bendiga, hermano Gerald, que por fin estás grabando en vivo. Saludos desde Venezuela y muchas bendiciones. Un placer, Carlos. Muchas gracias. Por favor, denle like al video. Thank you so much. I hope this helps you. Let me do about similar exercise, but now with, I will use a different airbrush. This is also Micron C, but this is a custom with a taller cup. This is also, as you can see, all the gold color is the bronze of the airbrush, you know, because are older brushes, but it works fantastic, How I set up my Createx paint. Let's talk about it. It's pretty much about the same. It's just a little different products. Give me one quick second, please. here I'm gonna show you first what kind of products I'm using. I'm using here Createx illustration. I will tell you this. This is a personal preference, okay? I only use Wicked for specific projects, but for detail work, I only use illustration colors. Why illustration and not Wicked? Because Wicked is a different formula and it's a thicker formula. You know, this illustration colors flows better, you know, and they have transparents and opaques. This is, for example, opaque black 5078 illustration opaque black. This is a fantastic black. But also, even Createx, I work pretty much 99.9% of my products are Createx, but sometimes I need to use solvent-based paint. Honestly, this is a new brand for me, but I'm so happy to try because it runs very smooth and it's very fine pigments, very highly recommended. Our friends of spray gunners have these products and it's a wide variety of colors. But most of the artwork that I do is with Createx, even all the automotive, motorcycle, and fine artwork use Createx. But like the solvent base, I need a reducer. So I use 4021 reducer, which is kind of a universal reducer for all the Createx products, okay? So these two are fantastic. Well, I always have a big bottle of reducer and also of Createx too. But guess what? This black is in here too. You know, this is my pre-reduced black. Okay, it has the shaker, and this is 60-40. 60, 60% paint, 40% reducer. This is less reducer here than in the solvent case, okay? But you can always adjust according to your needs. Sometimes I have up to 3 different blacks. One is 50-50, 50 reducer, 50 direct paint from the bottle, okay? I have a different mixture where it's 60-40 or only 15% of reducer. All depends on the project. Same thing happens with whites. I use different whites like heavy, medium, and light because sometimes you need to do very fine lines, so you need a reducer or over-reduced paint to work close with fine lines. And sometimes you need a heavy paint that covers immediately with less passes. That's why it's also important if you can, or if you have different airbrushes. In one project, you can have 3 different airbrushes with different colors, and you just pick the one you needed, okay? So, and also, this 4021 reducer, I have it in this bottle. In this bottle, if this is 4021 reducer, you can see the shaker here. You say, why you have a shaker if it's only reducer? Well, because this reducer, it has a special, chemicals or solutions that makes it work fantastic. You see how it looks a little bit more hazy now? Well, because I'm just mix it well, you know, but this allows me to have only the exact amounts of drops that I needed. Okay, so mention that, I will show you. I will do exactly same thing here, okay? My airbrush is empty, has nothing at the moment, right? but I will add a little bit of reducer here. This is 4021 reducer from Createx, okay? Always first reducer is a way of testing, okay? And remember, if I press down, nothing must come out right there, because that way I'm testing that my trigger is working fine. And if I press down, it's no paint coming out. But as soon as I pull it out, then I can see the stream or reducer coming out. Okay, so that means this is fine, okay? So this is about the same size custom micron as the other one, but with a taller cup. This is the custom model, very much my favorite brush. I have probably about 7 years with the same airbrush. I never change. Well, no, I'm lying. I changed the needle once and the nozzle once. That's it, in 7 years. Because you need to take care of your airbrushes. Here is my paint. 1, 2, 3 drops. 3 drops with a little bit, and I think it's too much paint for the amount of reducer. I will add a little bit more reducer. What happens is I spray almost all the reducer out. But I try to have it over-reduce my paint to start, and I go from there. Okay, so now I will, what need to do next, bubble again. Bubble my paint. Go lower with my air pressure. It was a little too high. And remember, if you cannot do fine line loops at the beginning, something is wrong with your setup. Okay? Look, I have fine lines right there from the beginning. Okay? Right there. If I want a dark line, I must be able to do it with no problem. Okay? If you can do this with your airbrush on the paper towel, you can do pretty much everything here. Astral Solari, when you reduce the opaque paint, does it becomes transparent? Let me tell you, it becomes a little bit translucent. It's not fully transparent. But I like to work with transparency because I can build up. I can go from transparency to opaque, depends on what I want to do it. Okay, so let's say I will do same thing, loops. Loops are always good for me because it allows me to do it, to test my airbrush, okay? Sorry, but I'm behind the phone, so I don't look right, but I'm trying, okay? So let's try. If I'm a little crooked, it's because I'm not as comfortable as I am, because the phone is in between. Look at here, I went a little bit too low. So, but that's fine. It's working fine. It's working very good, okay? And of course, I can do also the drop shadow. I recommend you to do this exercise, you know, very simple. And you can really see how your airbrush is working. Okay, this is Createx paint, okay? I recommend this exercise to my students. You know, I do it like, I do thin when I go up and thick when I go down. Let's say I go thin and thick now. Thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick. This exercise is very helpful, especially when you're learning to do dagger stroke, because then you will do only not the fine line up, but only the thick line going down. And when you do the thick line going down, it gives you an easy way to do dagger stroke, because it's like you going this way. You know, the fact to have a curve, it always helps, you know. And then you can eventually do this and this and this and this, you know. And if you can do that in a small, you can do pretty much anything you want.